Today we're going to talk about chapter 12. We're going to start out by reviewing some basics that we learned in chapter 5 about how to deal with files. And then today we're going to look at advancing that, making us, we can do a whole lot more than basically opening a file and closing a file. Next week, we're going to do some recursion, and the week after is the final exam. So it's winding down pretty quick. Today, let's jump back to chapter 5. Really familiar now in C with pound include, and something F stream was thrown up there. Okay. We created an object called output file from the class OF stream, output file stream. We used a function called open. We sent an argument over, a string argument of what we'd like to open, and we closed it. They were the three basic check marks. Create the object, get it open, close it. Well, inside of here, you had your read. You had some nice stuff like this statement, input file name, which would store it in name. You could use a while loop using the file name, and it would go through and store everything for us. And then we had input, the same thing. So it was basics. It was simple. We needed to remember to link it up, open it, do what we want, read or write, and close it. Okay, so as all 23 of you just did, you completed the code listings just in time, and that's a good thing. They're all completed. So going back to chapter 5, we did input file stream, output file stream for input and output. Today we're going to talk about F stream, which is going to be a little bit more advanced, but we can do input and output and other options all at the same time. All right, so we're going to start by taking a look at this example over here. And again, I have the pound include F stream. And instead of IF stream or OF stream, I'm just doing F stream. Create an object called data file. Perform a function on our object. We're going to open it, and we're going to pass in the arguments of a string. And these guys right here, as you can see, they're called access flags. This case, the access flag I'm including gets me ready to do output. Once again, as I finished up, I have to close the file. So the access flags are something that you need. And your noses are in the books because you're doing the code listings. And here are a bunch of access files. We have two that we'll add to the end. One will open the file if it doesn't already exist. That's that APP, append mode. That makes sense. We're going to finish up today with binary mode. That's a mode that doesn't work well with text files. Text files meant you could go in Notepad and open it up or create the file anytime you wanted. Binary is going to store it a little different so that the conversion time is quicker. It's not one you can open up and look at so easily. We have the access flag for input, one for output. They're going to be the big ones. All right. And then you did, of course, code listing 7.1. You got it up and you got the two arguments of the string, that's the file name, and at least one argument for an access flag. In this case, it was for output. Notice I said at least one argument. Again, I'm starting to think, yeah, we got an overloaded file called open that's going to be able to accept several different signatures. Man, look at me talking big words today. Okay, demo file. Here's an example of what you did in code listing 12.2. You notice there's a little bit of a difference. with the arguments. Again, it starts with the string, which is the file name. And now I have two access flags. I'm going to open it for output and append. If it doesn't exist, I create it and I will add to the end. If it was just out, it would just create it. Any questions on that? That was code listing 7.2. It was fine. Some nice things that come up were the ability to start to make our files look nicer. I can use set precision. I can use set width. And there were some examples of code listings that had this. We saw up there's fixed, set precision 4, 3, 2, 1. So this last one, set precision of 1, gave me that 17.8. Does set precision round up? Here's 8.16 or 8.16. Yeah, here's 0.82. So yeah, it looks like it's going to round up. Easy peasy so far, correct? Now, we've passed everything. We've passed ints, doubles, strings, arrays, all kinds of stuff, structures, and so on. Again, we can pass here. What are we passing? The name data file. Data file is an object. This is the address. You notice how it's receiving it as a reference variable of data type fstream. This is my data type. Okay? Same thing if I'm going to get ready and retrieve it or return it. Excuse me, I'd have something along those lines. Code listing 12.5. You all typed it up, so you got the idea of what's going on. I have prototype open file, true or false. Fstream, it's being passed as a reference. We're sending the address in. Following it up with a string, but we do want to pass it as the address. Over here, you see it's coming in, data type fstream. I want the address, and from there I can display what I want to display. It's kind of nice, the consistency of being able to go data type, variable name. Any questions? This is a nice, easy lecture. Other access flags. Ew. Yeah, ew. And again, we touched the tip of the iceberg of what's in C. You all know that. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. End of file, fail, bad, good. Usually, if he has a table in the book, it's worth checking out. That is just some good stuff. All right. Member functions. Some things that, some functions that are good to use. Get. File.get. If I want to read in a character at a time, I use file.get. I don't know why I skipped this one. I should know. I'm going to call my data file. I'm going to have a string followed by this delimiter. This says read the whole string in till the end of the line. I can make whatever delimiter I want. And in the book, you saw he did some craziness with using $sign as a delimiter, using space as a delimiter. But for code listing 12.7, and I'm hoping you did it and not just type this in and be done, but you kind of needed to have this guy. You needed to have Murphy.text in order to run the program. Murphy.text, Jane space Murphy, end of line delimiter, 4.7, end of line delimiter, etc., end of line, end of file. You don't have to type it that way. You can just type it this way. That's what it's going to look like. F stream, you got that. We instantiate an object of data type F stream. We call that object name file. We get this file ready for input. And if name file means it's all good, successful, it opened, it's there. While name file, this says I'm going to input. What is being inputted? Is that a word, inputted? It is now, not. What is going to be stored in input?
The contents of the first line
Content of the first line. Let's take a
or the
look.
or the first until the first space.
Until the first space. Yes, it's going to read it until the first space. So we may need to be careful and include that slash n delimiter so that it reads the whole line. And as you see right here, an example of get line, go to the data file, store it in a string, and go until it reaches that delimiter. And this would be the most common one. But otherwise, it's going to read until it sees a space. Jane Murphy, 47. Wonder if that person really exists. 47 John.
Probably not at that address, but I imagine that somewhere in the world there is someone named Jane Murphy.
I'm I'm
We could
thinking there
probably send
might
stuff
be.
there.
Yeah, we could probably start with the 350 million. That was my email. It wasn't the doorbell. Hey, doesn't care. Still thinks it's a doorbell. And again, this was a really good one. Code listing 12.8 gets that file ready for input. We're going to read it in. All good. Hey, Chain Murphy. I used Getline. Had a programming contest one time. The team of three could not remember Getline. They couldn't remember how to read in a whole line of characters at the same time. That was the old days. 12.9, just a quick look. Here I'm setting the delimiter as $sign. I'd have to create a data file with data with $signs in for it to get ready to read it in. Mentioned a moment ago, if I want to read a character at a time, like if I said, hey, what if we went back to Sonnet 18 and I said, read in a character at a time and now count the A's, the B's, the capital A, make capital and lowercase a's the same, you would want to use file.get, help you get character at a time. Pretty easy stuff, right? If I want to fill a file, a character at a time, I would use the put function. Get and put. Too bad it's not get and set. We've seen get and set already. Yeah. Questions up to this point? Okay. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. I want to see one thing. Yep. Yep. Okay. Now let's get into something that's a little more difficult. Up to this point, it hasn't been very challenging for you folks. And we're going to take a look at something that's now called a binary file. Shooby dooby doo, and I have my notes of binary files. Where are they? Here we go. At the top. Binary file, section 12.7. That is not necessarily stored as ASCII text, which means just as characters, which we can open up with Notepad. We can open up with a lot of text reader and writers and work with it. Now it's going to be stored more as something like raw data. And as you see, when I get my file object, call the function open, and I have two different access flags, out and binary. So now I'm going to do where it's going to go faster. It's less conversions when I save the file and reopen the file. I don't want anybody going in by hand and messing with it. I want to leave it just like it is. Reminds me of going back. One of the first games was a Bard's Tale, and the Bard had to carry weapons and money and health and all of that. But this was back in late 80s, early 90s. One of my students had a program called Zip Zap, which would let you look at almost like a binary conversion. And they were able to figure out where money was and would manually go in and change their money, go back to the game, and all of a sudden they'd have all this money and it could buy the weapons and everything. But there's ways to read the binary. We're not going to really mess with it. We don't need to. First thing we're going to take a look at is when we're working with binary files, it's a lot of character use. And then we're going to start out with working with just characters. Okay, created a variable letter that is of type char. I get ready and say file dot write ampersand letter, size of letter, the memory address, and how much should be written. In this case, size of letter is 2 bytes. So it's going to be looking for an address and it's going to be looking for a size. Down here, you see an address. Size. The address is going to be an array. So how we deal with writing this one is going to be a little bit different. Code listing. Well, here's a good example of that. I have a data array, A, B, C, D. I'm going to write, starting at that address, 2 bytes. Code listing 1213 is one you typed in. You implicitly have filled this array data, size 4. We're going to work F stream. I create an object called file of the data type F stream. I come in and I'm going to open the file, get it ready for output. I'm outputting it as binary. I'm going to write 1 character at a time. You notice how as I write it, it then moves it over. Close. Separate it, make it easier to read. Get the file ready to read, reading it in as binary. I read it, I come in and loop through this time. Remember, when I write, it moves it to over so that I can write and move it over. It's like an invisible little pointer type thing. Here, I have to go through it one at a time, store it in an array. Exclamation, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Program 1213. Don't lose it. Don't lose it. Okay, for this one, it's all about the characters. But as you can see at the bottom, what happens when I want to write data other than the char? I'm going to have to do a casting. This reinterpret cast data type value. Here's an example. I'm going to have an integer, x. I am going to do this reinterpret the character at the address of x. Somebody had something crazy for lunch that day. This is how I cast it into being what I want it to be. So when we get ready in 12.4, if I want to read in numbers instead of characters, let's see the similarities. I create an object called file. I use the function open. I say I'm opening it to write to in binary. I'm going to come in and reinterpret. I'm going to convert it. You notice the sizes out here that we just mentioned a minute ago. I'm going to write this number, converting it to a char. So that is 4 bytes. Reading it in, same kind of deal. I'm going to have to do this reinterpret cache about. And little extra there. Hopefully you only ever have to work with chars, and that would be good.
So
Especially,
if you're not sure, say that you're making a program that deals with all that. If you're not sure if it's all going to be jars, you may want to have it reinterpret just in case so that you don't encounter any errors.
well, the other thing is you could read it in as chars, but you'd have to maybe um character convert it to an integer or teeting. So you really would need to know what you're working with. Otherwise, you'd be safe with doing all chars, would be my opinion. Seeing
Right.
what you
And
have,
that's kind of what I was thinking. If you didn't really know what all your program would be potentially reading and writing, it might be best to stick that in there just in case so that if if it's not all chars, that would convert it to all chars.
yes.
Okay.
All right. Other questions. I mean, there's a lot more stuff. Creating records with structures and on and on and on. Skipped some of that. There's even something called a random access file. We get into this in 162. A random access file lets me do this thing called seek, where I have 4 bytes, 4 bytes, 4 bytes, 4 bytes, and I can, instead of going one at a time, it allows me to jump back, jump forward. I can go to any particular location I want by using seek instead of being from left to right, that whole linearness. Okay. But that's something that comes up in another course, so we don't necessarily need to cover it now. What do we need to cover now? All right. Well, in a minute, you're going to see something appear on D2L, and it's a program. It's a binary file, so don't even bother trying to open it and look at it and so forth. I need you to read in that binary file and see what the secret message is. Now, you're going to read it in, and it's going to look something like, if I read this in, stored it, which I don't need to do because I'm going to convert. So I'm going to read it in and print it. Okay. What do the characters look like? Well, the characters might look like um, I, J space N, P, N. And you're going, well, what do you mean that's a secret message? Well, it is because this guy is off by one ASCII number. In this case, this guy, what's before I?
Hi, Mom.
Yeah, this is actually hi mom. So lots of ways to do encryptions. I forget what the name of this is. Has a name where you offset all of the letters by one or
The
two.
Caesar shift
Yep.
cipher.
Caesar, yes, you're exactly right. Caesar shift cipher. That was in like National Treasure 2 or something. They talk about it.
Yeah.
I forget. So when you read this in, you need to figure out, is it off by one before? Is it off by one after? Like this case, it's off by one before.
Would in this case, would converting it from the binary to the characters and then incrementing or decrementing each character, would that work? Like, could you use plus plus minus minus for this? Or is that a different data type?
No, no. If I
Okay.
had a char
Right.
and it was CH,
Hmm.
and I said CH equals C, your question is, can I go C plus plus?
Well, wouldn't it be CH plus plus?
Yeah, I apologize. You're
That's
correct.
okay. You got coding on the brain, man. I understand it. You've had a
No, I
career,
got
but
excited because it came out to be C plus plus, but I didn't want this C and that CH to be, and
right.
you don't
But that would change it to a D.
find out, won't we?
I guess so.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think you would have written it if not, but we will see.
Okay. Somebody go to D2L and tell me, is it there?